welcome to a new video. This one is not a complete tutorial because I will have more lessons coming up on working with the ink pen and working on your line work in the future. But before we go into that, I wanted to create a small tutorial where we just talk about the mindset that is what I think is important when you're working with the line work. And I've been enjoying working with the ink pen ever since I started drawing, and I've kind of developed my own ways. It is a matter of style, but the style is the type of thing that sort of develops as you draw more and more in the future. But before that, what I think is the most important thing in practicing the line work, and it doesn't even have to be freehanding like I'm doing right now when I'm just jumping right into the sketch. And by the way, feel free to follow along and do the sketch with me. Or you can start with the pencil too. For me, the number one rule is setting my mind right before I start sketching. So, and especially true when I'm going freehanding right with my ink pen. And sometimes, just like I started doing with this video, I do it for myself as a sort of challenge to sharpen my skills and sharpen my observation skills, because when you go in with the pen you obviously can't erase it, so you're trying your best to do it best the first time and to do it clean the first time so you don't have mess ups when you're trying to cover up your lines or overshadow some areas because you're just trying to again cover up some mess ups in those spots. So for me, it's important to make sure I'm really studying what I'm about to draw. That I'm not assuming that I know what the object looks like, that I'm really looking at what the shapes of the curves of the lines are. And before I go into any kind of lines, I sometimes just kind of hover over the paper with my pen a couple of times. You see, like I'm doing it here. I'm kind of measuring where that line ends in according to the part of the drawing that I already have. And then I can put a tiny dot if I'm sure where that's supposed to end. I can like put a tiny dot in there. But before I go in with any kind of permanent lines, I always measure and remeasure, and it's okay to just kind of trace it in the air with your hand again like I'm doing here. I messed up a little bit the height here. I went a little bit higher than I should have, so I made my picture a little bit taller than I should have, but it's okay because it's still something that you can kind of fix along the way. You can just make the rest of the feature of the picture in accordance to the height of your picture. So that's the nose is going to be a little bit taller, the handle is going to be a little bit taller. It's not a big deal. But if you are drawing the handle, for example, you need to make sure that you're paying attention where the handle starts and where the handle ends. So you don't just start drawing the line hoping that you're gonna land in the right position at the end of that line. You really look at your drawing and kind of try to project with your eyes onto the paper where that line is supposed to go. And a lot of this is going back and forth and measuring always. For example, I've started with the base of the picture, so that is like my anchor. That is my guidance for the size and proportions of everything. And since this picture is actually quite symmetric, because well, the nose is on one end, but the rest of it is centered along the center line, so I can just look at the ends of the base of the picture and see where the rest of it falls in relationship. So if I for example, drew just vertical lines going from the outside ends of the base of the picture. So with the rest of the features, like the cap on top of it, would it fall inside of those lines or would it cross and fall outside of those lines? So is that smaller than the picture base or is it bigger? And that helps me to always kind of place everything in relationship to what is already on the paper. So even if you mess up somewhere, like I messed up with the height of the picture, you can still place the rest of it in accordance to what you already have on your paper. So that's why I like to start with something that will be easy to use as an anchor. So like the base in our case, it's already something that is symmetric and something that sets the size. For example, if I started at a random place like a handle, it will be hard for me to make a picture off of that handle because I have way too many factors now that are hard to just estimate and freehand. And another thing is that you can always check yourself. You can always kind of look at it and see how that line relates not just to the base that I picked as my anchor, but to the other lines. So now I put line for the cap so I can see where the lid is, and I can check also that nozzle kind of in relationship to where my lines on the lid are, how that nozzle is attached to the picture on the top and on the bottom. So you can always pick more lines as you start drawing and developing your drawing. And as you have more lines, you can just kind of go back and remeasure it. And here you can see me working on the handle. So the first time that I went in, I just kind of was hovering over the paper and just trying to measure it with my hand and just kind of feel the motion that my hand is supposed to do. And the beauty of this pen that I'm using right now, it's Pilot Technica. I can. It's no, it's Pentel Technica, and I can leave it in the description. Is that it has actually a very sensitive tip, so if you touch the paper very lightly, it doesn't really leave a very bold mark. It just leaves a very kind of small line, so you're able to use it as a kind of a sketch line to go over it later once you are sure that you want to go in that direction. But even if you are using something like a marker, that would be even more challenging and it would make you think even more much harder about what you're about to do with your drawing. It's still important to feel the motion if you need to do, especially if it's a longer line, because it looks much smoother and nicer if you do it in one motion rather than you try to pick it up and go again. It's something that I regretted doing with this handle because the handle came out looking a little bit sketchy and wobbly because it just had so many lines running into another. But I did do the first line in just sort of going one motion, and that still helped me to kind of get a more continuous curve for my handle. And another thing that I want to point out here is that it's okay to create at a painfully slow speed. You don't have to rush. I post a lot of sped up videos on Instagram, and people sometimes send me messages, oh, how can you draw so fast? Or it would take me ages, or it would take me the whole day to do that. And go at your own speed. If you know, I know it is something hard to do, so I'm not rushing anybody to create this in just 5 minutes. It's okay if it takes you an hour or 2 hours, because here it's more about the process rather than the speed. Your speed will come later. As you become more comfortable with the process, more comfortable with your supplies, speed is something that will just come to you naturally. But it's important in the beginning to focus on your technique, to focus on really paying attention to your subject, and just going with whatever feels comfortable at the moment. I have days when I feel really good about my drawing and I can create a couple of sketches in just half an hour. And I have days when it takes me half an hour to just draw a small picture. And both of the cases are fine. It's not about the race to the finish line. This is about enjoying the process of drawing and kind of fine tuning your creative tools, which is not just the use of the art supplies, but also the use of your hands, learning more about your eye hand coordination, which is something that develops over time. And if you haven't drawn or haven't painted in a while, you probably feel rusty and kind of out of touch with yourself when everything feels kind of odd and whatever you're trying to draw just comes out wobbly and wonky. So this is also something that I like to do before I go into larger drawings or larger paintings, to kind of reestablish this connection between my eye and my hand and my mind, so that it's then starts becoming kind of more fluid and more intuitive. So this process is not supposed to be just a tough, hard challenge. Try to enjoy it. Trying to find that kind of peaceful Zen mode. That's how I like to do it. Just when my mind is calm and when I am not rushing. Because usually these sketches are not something that I'm gonna sell at my store. This is something that I do for practice in my sketchbook. So I do want it to look nice, but I'm not feeling too precious about the outcome. So even if I mess up, then I don't really care about it as much. I know I did it for practice. But I still try to find a subject matter that is somewhat challenging, so that I am not just drawing a daisy for 20th time, that I'm trying something new. I'm trying new lines, new curves, I'm trying new motions with my hands, and trying working on some details that are tricky and that really need me to think about something in advance in order to really sharpen my tools and sharpen my skills. And another important part of this exercise is that it helps you to develop your judgment of the size of the object that you're drawing, of the curves of the lines, because a lot of times when I really need to be very specific about what I'm sketching, I would really measure it. I would break it into simpler shapes, and it's something that I'm definitely going to cover and talk about it more in the future. How to break the object down into simpler shapes and how to simplify measuring to make sure that you create a very accurate drawing. But in an exercise like this, it helps you to train your eye to sort of just guesstimate, um, and become a little bit more looser with your drawings, because something like this I feel adds a little more character when it's not perfectly measured out. But at the same time, it may be in the beginning it's not going to be perfectly measured, but over time you will notice how more accurate it's going to become. And it's also a simple exercise that you can do just about anywhere, while you're enjoying a coffee. In the morning, you can just put a cup in front of you and just grab a sketchbook and grab a pencil and just do this line work. Just sketch the outline of whatever's in front of you and just go with your eye without really measuring the object before you start sketching it. And it's something that you can also just, take sketchbook with yourself. You can also do in nature if you want to become a little bit more intuitive with your sketches, because it might be a little too boring sometimes, even for me, to make sure that everything is perfectly measured and everything's right to the size and everything's right to the proportions. And it's okay if you mess up. Like, I obviously made this picture not identical to the original image. Mine is much taller. It has a little bit different character because of that. But over time, as I said, you will become more accurate with your drawings, and measuring with your eye will become more natural for you. So it's something that you would use to double check yourself, even when you are using specific measurements for your drawing. If you're doing a portrait and you really need to kind of measure the features on somebody's face, or if you're doing something that has to be kind of true to the size, you can measure that, but your trained eye would still help you to point out any flaws in the measurements, and you will be more trusting to your own kind of gut feeling when something doesn't feel right, because you will be able to double check yourself in a lot of different ways to make sure your drawing is right and accurate. So, this is a very universal exercise with freehanding something. You might feel frustrated in the beginning. It might look a lot more sort of sketchy and not as finished. And doesn't have to look finished, it's fine. It's also a matter of just your personal style. If you want to work on very clean illustrations, then just try to focus on doing your lines only once, not going over them again. Even if you mess it up, just leave it like that. That's the character of that line. Then maybe you can try this drawing one more time from the beginning, and you will notice how much smoother and cleaner your lines will be the next time, because it's all just a matter of practice. And also, a drawing like this is just the great tool to have for warming up before any other drawing that you're about to do, because it kind of fine tunes that connection between your eye and your hand. So give this a try, or find something that is close to you. Find something in your house that you would like to sketch. You can create collections. You can just, I don't know, maybe do like different vases that you have in your house, so you have more than one object to sketch to kind of have a better practice, and see how it goes and see how you feel trying something new and just freehanding things and learning to observe the object with more attention and becoming more intentional with each line you put down, knowing that that one can't really be fixed or erased. So I encourage you to pick up an ink pen or a marker or even color pencil, because color pencil is not as easy as erase, and notice how much more careful you're becoming with your lines, how much more you observe the object to really see the shapes, the lines, and the curves. And over time, it's going to become something that you will do without even thinking about it. Your eye, your mind will be just trained to really study the lines and learn to measure by eye. And let me know how it goes. I would love to hear your feedback about this. I'm starting to add more shading now to the picture. It's something that we're gonna work on in the future, so don't really worry about that. I'll create a separate tutorial for all the shading with the ink pen. For now, just try to do outlines of different objects around you and just see how it feels at first. See what kind of lines are most challenging. Are they straight lines, or are they the curved lines that are most challenging for you? And maybe work on them a little bit more. Or is it measuring just with your eye is something that's more challenging for you? So again, just do a couple more exercises to just start becoming more comfortable with just measuring without a ruler, without simple shapes like circles and boxes. Just go in with your hand, trust your gut, and also see how your style develops as you start working more with these simpler lines, because they also over time will develop quite a lot of character and would sort of represent your style a little bit more. So I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial, this little chat. Let me know how your drawing goes. I love hearing from you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.